So, hello everybody, and thank you very much for joining the event, Liveable Hanover, a vision for a safer, healthier and greener neighbourhood. I'm Elaine Hills. I'm one of the local councillors in Hanover and Elm Grove, and I'm just going to start by letting you know that the event is being recorded, so it can be watched by anyone who couldn't attend today. I'm sure that you all want the area to be the best that it can for us and for our families. As I do very much, so I really welcome this opportunity to think about ways in which we can make our narrow streets safer and more people friendly. So this evening's event is to give you a taste of the positive effects that introducing a low traffic neighbourhood scheme could have here in Hanover, and to let you know how you can get involved in shaping it. You might have noticed I'm using the term livable neighbourhood rather than low traffic neighbourhood. The group of us who've been working on this so far thought livable captured the benefits that come with reduction of traffic, safer roads, cleaner air, more space to move around, walk and cycle, and therefore a healthier and more connected community. But the two terms are interchangeable in this context. So we've got a great lineup of speakers to help us put across that vision to you today. We've got Clyde Loakes from Waltham Forest Council. He's a deputy leader. We've got Caroline Russell, a councillor in Islington and also a member of the London Assembly. And we've got local resident and activist, active travel campaigner, Katy Rodda. And finally, we have Oliver Spratley, a principal transport planner at Brighton and Hove Council. A quick bit of housekeeping. It's a webinar, so your mics are muted, so you won't be able to speak, but I'll be keeping my eye on the comments as much as I can. And you can put questions in the Q&A section. And I have Mark Strong, who's helping sift through the questions. We'll try and put as many of those to our panelists as we can. We won't be doing that until everyone's spoken because we're limited. We deliberately had a limited time frame so that we don't go on for too long. The questions will be answered at the end. Any questions left unanswered, we will save and try and answer them later on. Okay, that means after the meeting we can email answers to responses to those questions to anybody who attended. So to kick off, I'm going to hand the floor first of all for a couple of minutes to Ian MacIntyre, who's the chair of Hanover Action, the local group that made the request to the council to introduce a low traffic neighbourhood in Hanover. So over to you, Ian. Oh, well, hello, everybody. It's really strange times and strange to be talking to 59 people we've got on. So I'm Ian. I live on Belgrave Street. Hanover Action is a non-party political group of people that have been doing things about street parties and street events for quite some time. We've planted quite a few trees in the neighbourhood. We've managed some street planters. There's the wonderful Christopher, who sort of started the project looking after 1 or 2 street planters with people. And now most of them are getting looked after by local people, which makes it lots better. Now, the other things that we've done is we've done this livable neighbourhoods idea that we've been talking about for a long time, that came out of One Planet Living, looking at what we could do to share more in our area and make streets more welcoming and usable by a lot of different people. So we've got a petition together that went to the council. That's gone through, which is really great. And I'm very concerned that this is seen to be led as much as possible by people. So I'm going to be trying to lead on a My Dream Street idea, where we're going to launch a poster campaign, and we're going to be doing very much more analog stuff. So I'm glad to see everybody here. Looking forward to hearing what the other speakers say, and please put your stuff in the chat and join us on the website where you can put your email in, and I will be contacting the people that put their names down if they want to represent their street. I'm the person that's going to be coming around and socially distanced, knocking on your door and saying hello and working those things out. So that's me, that's Hanover Action. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ian. So that just gives us a context of how this all slots into what people in our community have been asking for. So I'm going to swiftly move on. We don't have much time, so I'm going to move on to our first speaker, and that's Clyde Loakes, Councillor Clyde Loakes. Thank you very much for joining us today, Clyde. He was instrumental in rolling out the Mini Holland programme in Waltham Forest. You might have seen the video that's on our website, which shows how the area has been transformed and all the changes that have been made. So I'm going to leave it to Clyde to tell you more.
Thank you, Elaine, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me along. It is normally my role to warm up for Caroline, so so without further ado, I'll get started. Thank you, Mark. Next slide, please. I think, have you run on a couple of slides there? No, perhaps not. That's it. Okay. So Waltham Forest, North East London, Mini Holland, £27 million given to the borough to develop walking and cycling infrastructure at a pace and ideally some radical interventions rather than some of the traditional approaches to traffic calming and attempting to secure mode shift. We've invested a lot of time in kind of public engagement and the consultation process. First thing we always do is what we call a perception survey of the locality that we're about to go in with some proposals to see what people think about the area. These are the infographics for the Leabridge Road scheme, which was a segregated cycle track scheme rather than a low traffic neighbourhood kind of approach. But I just wanted to show you this because it does demonstrate very clearly the difference of opinions between businesses and people as in visitors, people as in residents, around what they want to see, what they like about the locality when it comes to transport infrastructure. You know, one of the big issues that we always get pushed back on is the need for businesses for parking. They are parking mad. They love parking, they want parking. Yet, you know, if you look at many of the studies that have been done, not only in the UK, London and the UK, but internationally, we all know if people walk, cycle, catch public transport to a shopping area, they will spend more money over the course of a year than anyone arriving by car. And, you know, this kind of just demonstrates that actually people don't want loads of car parking. They want to see less cars visible in their locality. And they think that makes for a pleasanter place as a consequence. Next, please, Mark. This is Orford Road, in the first of what was originally called a village, then became a livable neighbourhood, now is commonly referred to as a low traffic neighbourhood. A small retail shopping parade in the heart of Walthamstow village, Orford Road, 2,500 vehicles a day roughly used to go along here, tiny narrow pavements, double yellow lines, two-way traffic, cars used to park on the pavements, and if you had a buggy or pushchair or mobility scooter, you would end up having to be in the road combating vehicle movements. Next slide, please. We put in place a timed closure for this road because it did have a hopper bus route and shops that did need some deliveries at some point during the working day. So it was closed from 10 in the morning till 10 at night, 7 days a week, enforced by cameras on the first day. We opened it with the Dutch ambassador, Simon Smith's first day in office in London. He turned up with little bags of strew waffles because he thought it was going to be a fun, you know, really positive, vibrant, eventful day. And of course, we presented a coffin, you know, because that's what we do in London. We like a prop just to kind of demonstrate and focus our angst. It's not been easy delivering our programme. I'm not going to beat about the bush. People are going to get very, very angry. People are going to kick back, even though you invest so much time in the engagement and consultation process. So every one of our schemes that we've introduced has had consultation, positive consultation response and support for the delivery of those schemes. Normally, a highways consultation in Waltham Forest used to have between about 2 and 4% response rate. Most of our kind of big Mini Holland schemes have had 25% plus response rate from those being consulted. Take £100 million plus out of the council budget, out of social care, etc., and not a peep out of our residents. Proposed closing 40 roads with modal filters, the biggest demonstrations in the borough's 50-year history, all on the town hall steps, chanting my name with various Anglo-Saxon words either side of the Clyde and the Loakes. So, yeah, people are going to get angry about this. Next, please. But you can see the difference that you can make by, in this case, introducing modal filters into residential areas, taking out all that rat running through traffic, non-local traffic that was using this residential area to bypass the traffic infrastructure that is designed to manage those kind of amounts of traffic. I mean, this is a residential area that was largely laid out in the Victorian times, you know, so before cars and before mass car ownership. So the difference that we have made by taking out those vehicles. Now, clearly 2 roads still have a challenge. These are quite old figures, I'm afraid. We've subsequently put in a school street in this neighbourhood. So we think on East Avenue and Beulah Road, we'll have actually seen traffic volumes now fall into the negative as opposed to slight increases. Copeland Road's the most interesting one. That was a road during the consultation that we weren't proposing a modal filter to be installed, but the residents came back and said, yes, give us a modal filter. There's only 60 of us live in this road, and look at the reduction, you know, 2,500 vehicles a day taken out of that residential street, that tiny residential street. And the difference is incredible. Come to the village, have a walk around, as Caroline has done with me on a couple of occasions now, and before you know it, you're walking in the middle of the road, because that's the space that pedestrians have now been able to reclaim. So a modal filter is planters, bollards, where you prevent motor vehicles from driving through a residential area, but pedestrians, cyclists, mobility scooters, even people on horseback, if they really wanted to, can still get through that road. So you're just preventing a road being used by motorised vehicles as a rat run. Next slide, please, Mark. And this is what Orford Road looks like now. Pedestrians, cyclists, micro scooterists, children have totally dominated that space. The shops have got wider pavements, so they're now able to kind of take over more of the public realm themselves. And doesn't it look different? In fact, it is always sunny in Orford Road now, whereas before it was always drizzly, rainy, cold and miserable. But now it's always sunny and you can always hear the birds sing. Next, please, Mark. Francis Road in Leighton, a similar approach. Again, a time closure. Again, a very traditional retail area in the heart of a residential area. You know, the Victorians got that right. You know, they knew that they wanted to have local shops in the heart of residential areas. This was the first B road in the UK to have a time closure installed on it. And just look at the width that was of the road space that was given to cars, and they still felt the need to park on the pavement as well. And look at the difference now. You know, the businesses have really taken ownership of this space. They're owning the planting, they're running the planting, they're running events on that street. Really, really positive stuff happening there. And again, these are becoming destinations for the population of Waltham Forest and North East London, where actually people come to spend their money now at the weekends and in the evenings. Next, please, Mark. Loads of greening and loads of new pocket parks, narrowing very wide junctions in residential areas have also given us the opportunity to put planters in where the local community have taken ownership and are now planting up and owning that planting. Next, please, Mark. Lee Bridge Road, the 2 bottom pictures are the ones I want to draw your attention to. The one with the bus and the barricades. That's how we used to treat pedestrians and cyclists. You could just see them fighting for that tiny little bit of space there. That was a segregated, no, not segregated, but a painted line cycle track and a pavement. Those people doing the right thing, walking and cycling. And that's how we treated them. And then the other side, what that exact location looks like now, because we've taken some of the carriageway that was dominated by motor traffic and given real space to cyclists and real space to pedestrians. Next, please, Mark. Complementary measures. You can't just build infrastructure. You can't just put in road changes, modal filters, whatever, without building a package of complementary measures. So we have a couple of hundred of adult and children's bikes that we loan out for free to adults and children. We have a huge fleet, growing fleet of cargo bikes now of all shapes and sizes, some of them e-assist now, again, where business and family can hire those for free now to try before they buy, because cargo bikes are a real expensive investment to make, and to see whether it works perhaps for their business model, etc. Next, please, Mark. Thank you. Cut cycle parking, the green bread bin looking ones in the bottom corner there. We have over 500 of those now, with nearly 5,000 people on the waiting list, the most of any local authority in the UK. They take up the space of a car parking car on a residential street. We're very clear they will go on a residential street. That won't be tucked away on a dead wall or just round the corner. You know, they need to be visible, and they need to have the kind of profile and prominence that a parked car would normally have. And then we have our hubs at our stations as well that have got CCTV cameras in, tool stations, panic alarms, etc. Next, please. COVID-19, we've been rolling out emergency measures, speeding up the delivery of low traffic neighbourhoods. And I'm sure Caroline will talk about what she's been doing and supporting in Islington with regard to that. So I won't dwell on that. Lots more cycle track and lots of school streets as well. But actually what we've seen is the in Paris, they talk about the 15-minute city. The Times talks about a 20-minute neighbourhood. We talk in Waltham Forest now about a 15-minute neighbourhood, about how, because of our interventions by reducing the domination of the private motor car on our residential streets, just how we've revived some of our former shopping parades and retail units in some of these traditional neighbourhoods. And actually, during the initial lockdown, just how much more important they were to the local residents. It meant they could work from home. It meant they could get things on their doorstep when they just had that hour to spare to kind of go out for some exercise. Next, please, Mark. Just a summary of just some of the things that we've done. Over 80 modal filters we've now introduced, 32 kilometres of segregated, semi-segregated cycle track, massive increase in cycle use, loads of improved pedestrian crossings, putting pedestrian crossings where pedestrians want to cross, not where it's convenient for cars to halt, is really, really an important part of what we've done. Loads of what we call blended crossings at side road junctions, where we reinforce the highway code by making it very clear that pedestrians have the right of way, and there is no need for them to defer to the motor car at those junctions. Next, please, Mark. And just, you know, this isn't just about active travel. This is a way of life. It is community cohesion, more people talking to each other because they can hear each other now, and there's spaces for them to talk. It's about air quality. It's about the climate emergency. It's about public health. But still, despite all of that, despite the weight of evidence and positivity around these kind of interventions, you will still get people calling you some pretty unpleasant names because you are challenging a status quo that has been embedded in our kind of urban lives for some 40 to 50 years now. You know, I'm very clear, I am nothing like Mugabe whatsoever. Next, please, Mark. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you very much, Claire. That's a really nice run through. And you're right. It's about a lot more than just stopping the traffic. It's what that brings, what that does, how you do it, how you consult. I just hope we have as much money to spend as you had, but I don't know if that's going to happen. I'm going to move swiftly on to Caroline Russell. She's chair of the Greater London Assembly Environment Committee and also a councillor for Highbury East. And we really appreciate you coming along today. She's a strong supporter of low traffic neighbourhoods, and you've been campaigning since the 90s on people-friendly streets. So off you go. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you, and it's really great to be joining you all, and it's so amazing we can do this by Zoom. So yes, I'm Caroline Russell. I'm a Green Party councillor in Islington, and I'm also a London Assembly member, which means my job is to check the Mayor of London's doing a good job. And in that role, I have been visited Waltham Forest many times and seen the excellent work that Clyde and his colleagues have been doing there, because it has been absolutely groundbreaking what has happened in Waltham Forest. And I can confirm that not only does the sun always shine in Waltham Forest, that you can always hear the birds singing, but every corner you walk around, you will find children playing in the street, giggling and having a nice time. It really is extraordinary the way that it changes our streets. But I came into, got into politics through campaigning to reduce road danger, to make more inclusive streets that work for older people, for disabled people, as well as for people who cycle. But I always campaigned with an organisation called Living Streets rather than with the cycling organisations, although I've always ridden a bike. Over the years, there has been a growing public health case for making our streets more people friendly, for reducing the dominance of cars, and for making sure that it is safe and convenient to get around on foot and by bike, rather than defaulting to car use and the increasing vehicle domination of our streets. And we've seen over the years, so I'm just going to set my timer so that I don't overrun. We've seen over the years a real change in the way that traffic behaves. So over the last 10 years, there's a graph which I'm sure Mark Strong, who's on the panel, might well be able to find and post on Twitter and link it to this group or put it in the chat. But there's a graph that shows the increase in traffic on residential side roads, where all the other traffic, the traffic on main roads, the traffic on motorways, all that traffic has basically stayed pretty stable. But for the last 10 years, the traffic on residential side roads has just gone up. And that is due, everyone thinks, to the advent of sat-nav and apps like Waze that actively push through traffic along residential roads, which make our streets much less people friendly. It means if you've got a lot of traffic on your street where you live, you're less likely to know your neighbours, you're less likely to hang out in your front garden, and less likely to talk to other people on the street. So we're facing several problems with all this traffic. There's the crisis of air pollution and the crisis of physical inactivity. Now, the air pollution crisis, we have rising levels of nitrogen dioxide pollution, which causes lung and heart health problems. But we also have the issue of PM 2.5 particle pollution. And as chair of the Environment Committee on the Assembly, we are doing a scrutiny at the moment into air pollution and the impact on health. And Dr. Ian Mudway spoke to us just recently about their growing concerns about PM 2.5 particle pollution, because they are detecting measurable impacts, negative impacts on children's cognitive function, as well as a growing correlation and links to onset of dementia and worsening of dementia. So this PM 2.5 particle pollution, that's not just the stuff that comes out of the tailpipe of cars, it's what comes from the tyre wear, so and road wear when people are driving. So these tiny, tiny little particles, they're so small you can't see them. They're so small when you breathe them in, they get into your bloodstream. And those are having a massive negative health impact. And certainly nowhere in London is within World Health Organization limits for PM 2.5 particle pollution. And I understand most of the country, we are above limits, safe limits for PM 2.5 particle pollution. And that's why these solutions that enable people to walk and cycle are so important, because you can't just say to people, don't drive, without making a difference to the streets where people live. And if people are able to make those local journeys on foot or by bike or by mobility scooter or by wheelchair, then that is a whole load of the traffic that is driving around on our local streets that just disappears. And we leave the roads for the deliveries that aren't being made by cargo bike, and for the for deliveries, for emergency services, and for those people for whom getting around in a car is their only option. And there will be some people who that applies to. We also just at the moment have the heartbreaking legal case going through, and we're expecting the judgment tomorrow. Ella Kissy Deborah, her mother Rosamond, is fighting to get the death certificate from her daughter who died in 2013, age 9, I think, to cite air pollution as the cause of death on her death certificate. And I think every single level of local government and national government is going to have to think, whatever the outcome of the Ella Kissy Deborah case, every level of government is going to have to think about what they are doing to reduce the impact of air pollution on their communities. Now, there's another crisis, which is the crisis of physical inactivity and the diseases of physical inactivity, like growing increase in diabetes, growing increase in obesity, and also obviously the climate crisis. And if we are going to reduce our carbon emissions and get them within safe limits, the best way we can do that is to reduce the number of miles driven. And so measures like low traffic neighbourhoods are absolutely a brilliant intervention that enables people to drive less. Now, they're part of a jigsaw. They're not the whole solution. So in London, we're introducing low traffic neighbourhoods. We also have an ultra low emission zone, which is designed to clean up the vehicles that people drive. And I suspect that in London before long, we will have smart fare, privacy friendly road pricing, which is a way of charging by time of day, by engine emissions and distance travelled, which is a way of really incentivizing people to drive only the most essential journeys. Now, the COVID crisis has meant that for us in London, we've had an absolute crisis for Transport for London because they've lost all their fares income. And unlike any other transport authority for a major city in the world, they are dependent, 72% of their income is dependent on fares income. So with that catastrophic drop in people taking the bus and the tube, we're left with people walking, but also a lot of people deciding to get into private cars. And so the urgency of rolling out low traffic neighbourhoods to reduce the likelihood that people use cars for local journeys while we're living through these tiers and lockdowns is absolutely crucial, because otherwise we will just have a massive pollution spike. And PM 2.5 particle pollution is also being linked to susceptibility. So exposure to that pollution is linked to susceptibility to contracting COVID. Now, I just want to say a little bit about the politics, because one of the things that is really interesting about low traffic neighbourhoods is that they are supported by our Labour mayor in London. We have Labour boroughs who are doing great work rolling out low traffic neighbourhoods. But I also have a letter from Grant Shapps that he wrote to me recently. And he says, I welcome your support for low traffic neighbourhoods in London boroughs. We know the majority of people support the reallocation of road space for cycling and walking in their local area, and good quality schemes will only serve to further enhance this support. So there is government support for these measures. There is support from Greens, there's support from Lib Dems, there's been some great work by Labour councils in London on low traffic neighbourhoods. There are some, I mean, Clyde's work in Waltham Forest gives a model that can be followed. Now, his work was super expensive because he was a trial area. But what we're seeing now in London is low traffic neighbourhoods being rolled out on much larger spaces, areas, which are being put in much, much more cheaply than was done in Waltham Forest. We do need the main road measures that Clyde referred to. So the measures like, you know, things on main roads to actually make those into less hostile and more pleasant places to get around under your own steam. But I also want to just say one other thing, because one of the things that people complain about low traffic neighbourhoods is that they're not helpful for older people, they're not helpful for disabled people. And actually, I've spoken recently with organisations representing disabled people. I've spoken with Transport for All, with guide dogs, and also with Wheels for Wellbeing. And what I heard was that many disabled people do not have access to a car or van, that measures that reduce traffic and make streets safer, if you're getting around with a white cane or getting around with a wheelchair or a mobility scooter, actually that's a real help for enabling you to be independent. So while there may be some issues and some bits to do with bits of blue badge parking or whatever, actually a lot, you know, when having spoken with disabled organisations, disabled people, I feel comfortable in that knowledge that actually low traffic neighbourhoods will help disabled groups and also older people who, you know, need more time to cross the road, and having less traffic makes that feel less frantic and more possible. And finally, I meant to say earlier on, what is a low traffic neighbourhood? It is a network of streets through which no one can cross from one main road to another. Every single home in a low traffic neighbourhood is accessible by car from the main road network. But you cannot use a low traffic neighbourhood as a cut through, as a rat run, to shave off a few minutes of your journey to cut through from one main road to another. So that's the basic principle of how a low traffic neighbourhood works. And it is, you know, I'm going through it at the moment. We've got a massive low traffic neighbourhood coming through in my particular ward. I have a huge post bag. A lot of people are worried and about how it's going to work, but there's also an awful lot of people who, before it's even come in, are writing in support. So I'll leave it there. Sorry, I've spoken a bit longer than I meant.
Thank you very, very much, Caroline. That was great. Great to hear, you know, all those different perspectives. And I really think it is interesting that people often talk about disabled people and elderly people, but in fact, you are putting things into place to allow, you know, people to move around more safely and to enable older people or people to be able to get around. So it is about fairness, and also, as you say, people who do drive will find the streets, you know, easier to drive down, and it'll be less frenetic for everybody. So thank you very much for that. That's brilliant. We're going to move on to Katy. We're going to have to be quite quick because I want to leave a bit of time for questions at the end. So Katy, if you can try and keep this down to 5 minutes. I know you've got lots of wonderful things to say. That would be great. Katy lives locally, and she's going to share her ideas about how a low traffic neighbourhood could work in Hanover.
Okay, guys, I'm going to try and share my screen, so bear with me one moment. Just we've gone to a slideshow here. Here we go, slideshow. Okay, can everyone see my screen pretty well?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll go back my screen on the side there. Okay, right, so Liveable Hanover, let's see what we can get to here. So the background, aspirations and inspirations as well. Okay, oopsie, next one. How am I going to move on? No, this isn't working now. There we go, right, okay. Lovely. So what is a livable neighbourhood? It's my screen and the way at the top there. Here we go. Okay. It's prioritising livability above mobility. So we're making streets for people. You can see that picture on the side there. So optimising space of social and community value. We're turning, instead of having roads that are links from one place to another, we're turning them into places in themselves, really. And I think people already mentioned the 15-minute city, which is about being able to access things very, very locally, which is more convenient actually, and actually very important for accessibility as well, because if your city doesn't have a 15-minute city and everyone has to drive or has to travel for a long way, that really disadvantages people who don't have those options. And it's just about, yes, it comes from urban realm and transport studies behind livable neighbourhoods. So why are we interested in livable neighbourhood? as I think Carolyn mentioned, LGV traffic, delivery traffic has grown on the road network hugely, and added to that, a lot of that has grown on local traffic roads. And I think the reason it's important to explain the reason these roads aren't designed for heavy traffic is they don't have any designs at junctions, for starters. So your main road network has got designed junctions, it's got signals, it's got all kinds of things to make sure the traffic can flow. But residential streets don't have those things. That's one of the ways in which they're not designed for heavy traffic. And nobody was asked if they wanted their streets to become less livable and have extra traffic down anyway. So what are the benefits and why they're important? So 65% of people think children should be able to play in their streets, which is absolutely brilliant. So this is a picture from the 1960s.
Sorry, Katie, we can still only see your first slide. Is there any way
Really?
you
That's a bit strange.
put your cursor down at the side and it will bring the biggest one up?
Okay, I'm moving an arrow. It's moving my screen. That's really weird.
On the main screen, it isn't, unfortunately.
Sorry. Okay, hang on. I'm going to unshare, I think, and I'll try and talk, and I'm going to send this to Mark if I can. So bear with me, guys. I'm really sorry about this. See if I can get back to my screen. Sorry about this. I'm going to stop
We
sharing.
can see it now.
You can see it. Okay.
There we go.
Sorry, guys. Okay. Okay. Let's go back to share. Okay. Yes, I'll move that over here. How's that? How's that?
Yeah.
So, why are we interested? Let's go back to. Sorry, guys. That's right. Done that one. Done this one. Nope. Sorry. Can't see my own screen now. Wait a moment, guys. So sorry about this. I'll get there in the end. Right. Hang on just one moment. Do apologise, everybody. This is what happens sometimes. So why are we interested? That's the one. Yes. Why the benefits? So lots of people think children should be able to play in streets. And I said here, even if you live on a network road, which I do, I live on a main road actually, but I'd be very happy to have a low traffic neighbourhood nearby, because it means my children can go and play with their friends on their streets, even if it's not our own street. And when I want to travel through that area, it will be easier for me. Another point is new developments are never planned with rat runs in. They are always planned with network roads and quiet residential streets. So what we're really doing here is looking at the older areas that predate the new developments and saying, we'd like to have that quality here as well. And the thing that makes streets unsafe is moving traffic. So what we're doing is reducing the traffic on streets, the moving traffic that makes them less usable and less safe for everybody. So there's a very interesting slide here. This is a wonderful, wonderful urban realm specialist called Donald Appleyard, who sadly died in a car crash, but he did some lovely work. And this looks at the social connectivity of streets. And you can see the street on the left-hand side with the red marks, that's a street with heavy traffic. And you can see there are not very many social connections on this street. The neighbours are not talking to each other. The one in the middle here has moderate traffic and people are beginning to talk to each other. And then the blue lines in the street on the right hand side, this is where there was very little traffic. And you can see the social connectivity of that street was absolutely stupendous. It was really important. And people always feel happier on a street like that. And when the work that this included, they looked at the trust and the happiness and contentment of those people. And the people on the light traffic street had much more trust in their neighbourhood, much more satisfaction and contentment than people on a street with heavy traffic, because they had a better social life and a better social environment as well. So this brings us really to reimagining street space. So it's not about taking out huge numbers of car parking spaces. It's things like reducing very flared junctions. So those of you who know Hanover will know that there are a lot of junctions in the area that are very, very wide, and the pavement space on the corners is tiny, and the streets are very, very wide. And it's not really necessary because we don't get buses going down those roads. So you can start to reimagine the space and what you'd like to do with it. And I think Clyde made a lot of point about the parklets and planters and that kind of thing, so for community gardening. And I'd add to that playable features as well, so that if you're walking through the area with your toddler or your young person, you've got somewhere for them to jump on and maybe roll their cars along. But those features also offer people who are maybe less mobile an opportunity to walk a little and then sit down and rest with their shopping. So you have all kinds of features that are there for all kinds of people to make the area more walkable. And let's go to the next one there. So yes, accessible streets are walkable and playable. So what we really are after is enabling streets. And this is where the word accessible really comes in. So it's not just about a standard bicycle. I think somebody mentioned in the chat asking about Hanover's hills. I have to say the e-bicycle and e-bikes of all kinds are really changing hills in this country. They are flattening those hills. And I've just started working for an organisation whose CEO is actually a hand cyclist. She cycles with a hand cycle. And if you have high quality quiet streets and safe streets, you can cycle even if you need an adapted cycle and that kind of thing. And I think another point about this, even if someone can only walk for a few hundred meters, you know, people who, I do see people, I know people who walk with sticks and that kind of thing. And they, just because they can't walk far doesn't mean they don't value that walk. And it's really important to make that walk as nice as possible, even if it's only a few hundred yards. You know, they may really value that, and that small activity they have to do. Another thing we'd really like to see in Hanover is a few more street trees. Actually, speaking on my road where there are none, I'd love to see more trees. So we make it more walkable, provide a bit of shade and capture a bit of carbon as well. So in practice, what it means is motor traffic movements are engineered, as Caroline said, so you can't drive all the way through an area. So people who are driving in on one side and straight out of the other to avoid main roads will need to use main roads instead. And these main roads have been designed for high traffic levels. They've got signals at the junctions instead of our narrower residential streets, which aren't designed for heavy traffic. And the effect should be that it should be quicker and feel better to walk or cycle, if you can, within the zone than to drive, because the motor traffic levels have been reduced in the zone. And the other fact is, people often say, and obviously it's quite a natural thing to conclusion to draw, what happens to the traffic on these main roads? Does it go up? And there's been a lot of research on this because it's been quite a big concern for everybody ever since we started doing low traffic neighbourhoods. And actually, because motor traffic levels in the zone drop, it actually drops eventually slightly on nearby main roads as well. It never really goes up. It goes up at first, but after a while it actually settles right down. Because people are driving less generally in the location in the area, the main roads also calm down. You don't get huge increases in traffic there at all. So there's another one. I think
Sorry, can I just ask if you can wind up soon, Katie? Just because
very soon. So this is just a quick one about how the Dutch do it. So as you can see here, people on foot and bike can walk all the way through, and people in cars just have to drive a little bit further around to get to where they're going, and that calms those streets. Delivery vehicles, emergency services and bin collections are all key stakeholders, particularly the emergency services and bin collections, particularly in Brighton. So they're always consulted pretty much first, actually. That's how, in fact, in London, I just want to mention this, Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital are actually funding 3 low traffic neighbourhoods in Lambeth because they are so excited about the idea about healthier streets. I'll very quickly go on to this. This is a vague proposal. I will wind up very soon, just to show that it's a sort of ward-based thing. And just in the last point as well, the main challenges are actually beyond the zone itself. The zone itself is quite easy to engineer, but the big challenge and the main piece of work when the engineers get onto this is to handle those network roads around. So the reason I've drawn longer lines is because you need to manage that network road right up here. So you don't really want people, for instance, cutting up Franklin Road, or you want to make sure people are not going to be using these back streets through here and also along Freshfield Road. You need all those streets to be managed as well. So that it's avoiding those consequences is really important, and that's one of the key concerns of the people doing it. And I think I'm going to stop there. So thanks very much, everybody. I'll just stop the share there.
Thank you very much, Katie. It's really interesting. And if we had longer, I'd like to hear more of that, more detailed stuff. But I do think that we could have more webinars in the future where there's just us, and we could look more at the detail then. So that's brilliant. Thank you. And I think it is really interesting that new developments are naturally usually low traffic. And it's just the fact that our streets are a legacy of before we used to have to worry about cars. I'm going to introduce Oliver. If you could be as quick as, I'm so sorry, Oliver, because we really want to hear what you have to say. Oliver is Principal Transport Planner from Brighton and Hove Council. He's been looking at how a Liveable Hanover scheme could work. So I'll hand it over to you. Just if you could be quick, that'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Elaine. Okay, just going to start sharing the screen. Okay, yes, pleased to be here today. I've got a few slides. A lot has been said already, so I won't go too much over those points where they've already been well conveyed. So yeah, I'm in the city transport team, and we identify low traffic neighbourhoods as being a useful potential tool or framework for the future. So briefly, around some background work that Brighton and Hove have done really well so far and have been recognised for that. My background is urban design. I studied at the Joint Centre of Urban Design, and there's a very good handbook called the Handbook of Urban Morphology, which looks at the physical ways that cities have developed over the years, and the fabric of those cities, and how you can use that sort of theory in order to design better streets, and also research them and inform future places and spaces. And on page 203, they cover Hanover and Elm Grove. It's a framework, urban characterisation study carried out by the City Council here in 2009. So it looks at the movement, open spaces, and such like, in order to be able to define or describe the character of an area. And so, yeah, that's a good sort of section within that book to look at, and is good background for where we're moving forward for this project. So that graphic there is the movement aspect. That's the dimension, if you like, that's looked at in that framework. And also data that we've initially been sort of compiling that's accessible to the public as well, which is data sets that are produced by the social deprived or deprivation centre. I can't recall the exact name of it, that is spun out of University of Oxford. So they gather all the data sets, and they regularly update these measures in order to understand how places are performing against everywhere else across the country. So in terms of physical activity, you've got Hanover and Elm Grove, people there, you perform well. You're more physically active, and compared to other places in the country, so that's good. And in terms of services, accessibility, where you can walk to and so on, I noticed that you have the average distance to a pub is only 100 metres. So that's a story to be told, and lots of stories to be told in pubs. Hopefully one day again in the future, when we can all go back there for a cup of tea or whatever it might be. Okay, so some more of the data that's accessible is sort of covers where services are, where we need to be, where we want to go to, and also the centres within our area that we want to make more livable, living spaces. There's great references that have been provided today. Sort of back in my time at the Joint Centre of Oxford Brookes, reading about Henri Lefebvre and the right to the city, and Jane Jacobs, and people like that, Edward Sawyer, I think it is, and spatial justice. If we followed some of their principles, then a lot of this sort of data, the results and people's stories and anecdotes would be very positive. So anyway, that's some of the basic data. The amount of people in the ward is 2011 census. You're proud of the area. That's because it already does shine every day in Brighton, hence the name. So we can just make it even brighter going forward. 42% of households have no car. So that's another reason to perhaps argue for less through traffic. So all the things that people have already been saying so far, we very much in the City Council, our policy within the what's called the local transport plan, already could be, well, we're already in a position, policy-based, to deliver a local low traffic neighbourhood zone based on that. So it makes a lot of sense to us, and it's good that this idea has come directly from members of the community, which helps us meet your objectives. Why do we want to do it? We do want better outcomes for everybody across the city. That helps all the other divisions, not just transport, where we want to be. We want places to be socially cohesive, reduce inequities, and levels of deprivation needs to be reduced too. We are moving towards reallocating road space to more community space and for walking and cycling. And whilst some of the projects were rushed through, not rushed through is probably the wrong word, but the direction from central government required us to turn it around extremely rapidly in order to reduce the amount of people wanting to get onto a public transport. If those people were able to instead use a bicycle, that was reducing the pressure on that mode of transport, which made a lot of sense. But we've managed to keep a significant amount of those temporary cycle tracks open for the time being. Yeah, we want to create successful, accessible environments. Cars are welcome within a low traffic neighbourhood based on what we've researched. And it's a case of all the vehicles within that zone treating pedestrians and cyclists as equals, or perhaps more so the pedestrians really are top of the triangle. I'm not one for hierarchies particularly, but I think in urban design terms and transport planning terms, it's very, very important to have people at the top. Okay. They're called different things, low traffic neighbourhoods, livable neighbourhoods, mini Hollands. Barcelona are sort of taking the lead, I think, in some respects. They call them super blocks. Really positive term, makes a lot of sense. And they even have public art. A famous architect has created the guardians of the super block, or the super reals. And you see there that you have the sort of negative space reduced, the squares within the figures seated there, I presume, reflects the grid structure, which is it's a design, an urban design perimeter block that's very conducive to creating sort of low traffic neighbourhood areas. And they've just announced they're going to expand it across the whole city. So at least a third of the city, which is millions of people, but the whole city will become, a third of it will become these low traffic neighbourhoods or super blocks. So yeah, in order for us to move forward, we don't have identified budget at this time. So in terms of all those images there, probably the bottom left would be the first approach, the relatively low cost means to deliver a first stage of a pilot. In terms of modal filters, they're everywhere already. And that top left image you can see there is in London. Maybe Waterloo Bridge there, I'm not quite sure.
Wrap up just because we need a little bit of
yeah, I'm pretty much at the end now. We've got some links here in order to advise how we're going as sort of city council officers. We're currently using living streets in order to inform how we move forward in design terms and advice going forward. And I'm just going to make sure that I'm probably going to end it here. Just very quickly, these are all the challenges we've got in order of maintaining access. We need to manage the displaced. It's not so much displaced traffic. The traffic will be where it needs to be on the primary network. We need to consider residential aspects. We'll probably be maintaining controlled parking zones, blue badge, etc. Emergency access. We need to think about freight, home help and nurses in the community, which could increase given the current pandemic context. And I think final slide, we do need to, as already been mentioned, we need to think about refuse and recycling collection. It's a good strategy coming through. I think the possibility of underground waste bins, which will free up lots of surface space for such things as low traffic neighbourhoods and civic spaces and such like. So yeah, and number of bullet points. Yeah, I'll end it there, but thanks very much for the time you've given me. Thank you. And I'm just going to stop sharing.
Elaine, you're on mute. Elaine?
I knew I'd do it at some point, sorry. Yeah, I just said something wonderful and I've forgotten it all now. Yeah, thank you very much, Oliver. That was really interesting. There's a lot more you could have said and you've really given a perspective of what it's like here. I like this idea of the super blocks as well. That's something I want to look into a little bit more. Mark Strong was going to manage a couple of questions. I would say to our external guests, if possible.
Absolutely, thanks. So interestingly, Oliver's last slide, last points, literally, there was quite a few questions on all those issues. So I think if I can throw those open to Caroline and Clyde, things like home deliveries, waste management, refuse vehicles getting in, home care, care agencies. I mean, Clyde particularly, how is that managed? Because you have all those issues as a practical delivery of services in what I know from my partner's history is a very dense residential area.
So kind of deliveries, I mean, this is one of the kind of myths that people kind of like to put out, that people can't get anywhere by motor vehicle. Well, they can. They just can't use residential areas as a rat run to bypass, as a shortcut to kind of bypass the traffic management systems that are on main roads to manage high volumes of non-local traffic. So you can still drive to your house, you can still have a delivery to your house by a motor vehicle if that's what you really want to see happen. What we are seeing happen, and I'm sure you must have something similar in Brighton, is the emergence of kind of zero emission delivery, last mile delivery systems that more and more businesses are utilizing for the delivery of their goods to their place of work, to their shop, as well as the onward delivery to their customers of goods. And we're seeing that. So for example, now we're seeing repeat prescriptions being delivered by zero emission deliveries to those who are housebound in Waltham Forest. So some really interesting innovations in kind of changing behaviours, improving services to very vulnerable people as well, just as an example. Refuse trucks, all of our properties can still be accessed by refuse trucks. We have, because of the nature of some of our road layouts, and probably Caroline's probably got them the same in Islington, we have narrow refuse trucks for particularly narrow streets and roads that are slightly smaller than some of the traditional ones, and those roads are serviced by those particular trucks. There was another point, Elaine, Mark, remind me what the final
social care visits.
Social care.
Home care.
So this is an interesting one, isn't it? So this is one of the big challenge for us, and we've just had an independent climate commission in Waltham Forest, and the first people to complain are, if there's any social workers on this call, I do apologise, but some of the first people to constantly complain are social workers, social care workers, medical practitioners when it comes to introducing low traffic neighbourhoods. And it's been one of my big bugbears that some of the people that you would expect to be at the forefront, ambassadors and champions for the delivery of low traffic neighbourhoods, have actually been some of our most ardent challengers and critics. And I keep going back to them, you can change your behaviours. If you're a social worker in Waltham Forest, it is actually just as easy for you to get around the borough now by bike rather than having an essential permit, if that's feasible for you. And of course it is feasible for a chunk of social workers to move around like that in the borough. In Denmark, in Holland, you don't see social workers all using cars to get around. You don't see GPs, nurses, social care workers all using cars to get around. You see them using a mix of modes, and they do use bikes to get around, but we just have to break this kind of culture that says the car is king in everything that we do, whether it's the way we lay out our residential areas, or whether it's how we kind of how we employ people. But we are having those ongoing discussions and debates with all of those practitioners to try and kind of win the arguments, and we will get there eventually. The world is getting smaller. We are turning more into neighbourhoods than the big London city where everyone from the suburbs travelled into central London. The importance of the neighbourhood is growing, and with that means some of these active travel modes that have been bemoaned, belittled over many, many years are really now coming to the fore in a way that they haven't for many, many years. Now is the time to really ram this change of behaviour, this change of approach home.
Thanks, Clyde. I think Caroline wanted to talk, and you mentioned London, so let's, Caroline, I don't know if you wanted to talk on the London scale or on the Islington scale.
I wanted to talk about the health worker scale, because actually, while Clyde was talking, I was reminded of a piece of casework as a councillor from about 5.5 years ago. And it was someone who approached me. She was a community nurse, and she was desperate for more bike parking on the estates where she was visiting people on her daily rounds. And the lack of bike parking was the thing that was preventing her from being able to do her job with her bike. And I think we have to really think, you know, the enabling people to get around on foot and by bike means that they are themselves building physical activity into their daily life. That is healthy. And I think that's why we're seeing so much support for low traffic neighbourhoods from the BMJ, from doctors, from nurses. There are so many people who can see that business as usual with traffic taking over all the living space in our towns and cities is just not tenable when we have the air pollution crisis that we know is causing so much harm to our heart and lung health, but also these more recent discoveries of links to dementia, links to impaired cognitive function in our children, school-age children with impaired cognitive function, because they're breathing the stuff that gets produced when tyres wear over a road. And I think we have to really think about the public health impact of the way that the fossil fuel lobby have actually made everyone think that getting around in a car is completely normal. And they are desperate to keep selling cars because that's their business model. And we can have streets that are not dominated by cars. We can have streets where it's possible for the community nurse or the social worker to be able to get out and about. And e-bikes change it completely because they make hills into a complete breeze. And certainly since I got an e-bike, I have been cycling all over London, to the bits of London that are very hilly as well as the bits that are flat. And it does really make a difference. And so I think we just have to imagine, we have to be able to imagine our towns and cities less dominated by cars. And that will mean changes. It does mean getting some waterproof trousers for a rainy day, or carrying an umbrella, but we don't melt when we get wet, and there aren't that many wet days. And it really, the difference that reducing the traffic makes just to everybody's everyday lives. And think of those people who don't even have access to a car or van in the first place. In my borough, there's only 26% of households have access to a car or van. The vast majority of people do not have access to a car or van. So, you know, but even where you are in Brighton, you've got, you know, almost 50% don't have a car or van. Let's make those streets work for everyone.
That's a good point too. There's a few questions coming in about what's the first of audible steps for Hanover, what's the timescale, what's the next thing, and I think I've got to throw that at Oliver, seeing as he's got his mic on anyway.
We better make this the last question.
Well, let Oliver to wrap up from the council, because you know I think obviously we are just the custodians of the street. The council are the managers, the operators. They have the final say on what actually can happen. So I think if Oliver can speak, and maybe you want to sum up on the council as well, Elaine.
Okay, shall I start, Elaine?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I think yeah, your point around clearly the council or the highway authority, and but I think with an LTN, low traffic neighbourhood, it's quite important, I think, for it to be successful. I think we got through the first hoop in terms of it's being asked for by the local community, and I think the more support we can get for that going forward in this first initial stage of research will be really, really useful and support potential success going forward. And I think there would need to be ongoing management by the local community in some ways, particularly if it's the initial lower cost. Perhaps there might be some gardening to do, you know, in terms of planters or whatever it might be. And yeah, I think that more social engagement it's natural extension really, that the community will play an ongoing part of what happens. But in terms of how we can support the initial request for a pilot LTN in the area, and the resources that we have for that, we are in the process of identifying budget for it, and we have sketched out. My last slide was to show potential steps of how we could move through. Doesn't give a great deal of detail other than you know, there is a potential ETS committee that we need to go back to, perhaps once we've worked up the potential or options for a low traffic neighbourhood area. I think the initial request coming out of the deputation, was a deputation or at least the public question asking for, was that could it be done in 6 months? I think we've initially said we could potentially do it in a year. The pilot version, the more inexpensive integration for a number of modal filters or planters at key junctions. And Katy Rodda, Katy presented earlier today, and some great work so far. I think the next step will be for us to develop that. Maybe I think we can do it perhaps before we get a consultant on board, so we can save some time. We can develop a plan and show potential types of modal filters and work up some initial costs for that. But yeah, we do need to do some more work internally and report back to Elaine and the community, wider community, and map out next steps more clearly.
Thank you very much, Oliver, and thank you, Mark, for managing the questions. There are more questions, but we'll have a look through them afterwards and try and get the answer out on the Hanover Community Notice Board. Somebody said something very valid in the chat about not everybody is digital, not everybody is included in the conversation. It's been difficult because of COVID to get messages out non-digitally, but you're right. So we will be starting to create more newsletters, having events, that kind of thing. We did have an event a few months ago where we had a mini parklet and we had pens and everyone could draw what they wanted to see, but we couldn't do it again because COVID restrictions wouldn't allow that. So we'd love to keep you all in the conversation. I've put in the chat what you can do, hanoverandelmgrove.net. You can go there to have a look. I noticed Clyde put some inspiration in the chat about what they've done. Waltham's a link to I can't quite find it, but it's in the chat to what Waltham Forest has done. And there's also an email address that you can, liveablehanover@gmail.com, that you can go to. I want to say a massive big thanks to Clyde and Caroline, who passionately and in a very informed way told us so much about how these things are already working and how important they are to communities, to people's mental health and to their physical health and to our children's safety. So I really, really, you know, want to thank you for really getting that message out. Also, Katy and Oliver, of course, I want to thank you. I feel like we can have you back again. So hopefully we can have a bit longer with you next time, where we can really talk more at a local level about how this will work within Hanover. So yeah, really, really big thanks to you for that. Thanks to Ian for giving us the Hanover perspective. He said a very important thing to me just now. It's already happening in the North Lane in a way. The North Lane already has what we would call filters to stop people just driving through the middle of it. So we are familiar with these things. We're just not familiar with them within our area or within our kind of communities, particularly our more, you know, communities with older houses. And thank you also to Mark for all of his filtering of questions. We tried to answer some of them, but what I'm going to do is save the chat and we'll try and work through it a little bit afterwards. So yes, thank you everyone for coming. It'd be great if you can get involved. We'll keep the conversation going. And I hope you found it useful. Oh, Ian, one little thing you want to say?
I'd really like to say something. You know, we're going to go non-digital in the new year. we're going to be launching a My Dream Streets campaign, which is a sort of poster that the people that have signed up to be the representatives of their streets are going to take out. And you can write in your poster and put it in your window, whatever you want. You can put more car parking if you want. But it's to start that conversation in a real live way, street by street, and getting people talking about it. Some people have been chalking on the roads. There's going to be lots and lots of non-digital stuff going on. But do sign up to be the representative for your street, or find out who the representative from your street is. And I'm going to come around and talk to people face to face about that at a certain distance.
Yes, of course. Okay, I will not detain people any longer, and I'll just say one big thank you to everybody for coming and for taking part. Thank you very much indeed. Goodbye, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you.